While I most certainly enjoyed my time with Control, I have to admit that I've also had to come to terms with the fact that I may not be the sharpest tool in the shed. It takes a good deal of introspection and self-deprecation to come to this conclusion, and albeit my self-esteem and self-worth has been tarnished by the fact that I just have no clue what is going on in this game, story-wise at least, so allow me to elaborate. Control is a single-player story-driven game with some elements of an RPG. The game stands or falls by the telling of this story. It is told in the first person by the protagonist,
Faden. Call me Jesse.
who pitches up at the seemingly government building of the Federal Bureau of Control, also known as the FBC, in search of someone. And then things get weirder and weirder and weirder.
What are you drawing? I'm drawing a dog!
I'm drawing the pyramid.
The story is told by way of cutscenes, inner monologues of the protagonist, and various collectibles, to which I will get very soon. It's not the game missions and underlying motivations of Jesse that I have an issue with. The missions are for the most part relatively straightforward, go there, get that elevator to work, find this thing to activate that thing, the usual. However, the cutscenes seem deliberately ambiguous and are shown at odd times to throw the player off the right track. In addition, and as a minor spoiler, so feel free to stop the video right now if you're not interested, albeit it's a minor spoiler, some of the collectibles refer to an evil force in the game as the Hiss. These collectibles come in the form of official FBC reports and documents. However, early on in the game, the FBC agents seem to have never heard of that term before.
Somehow, this hostile force, this
Hiss?
that works. Somehow the Hiss managed to infiltrate the building without any warning.
And it seems that Jesse coined the phrase. That to me was a huge plot hole that I just couldn't get past every time a bit of information was presented to me. I couldn't help thinking about that issue. How could official documents have reference to the word Hiss, but no one in the agency has ever heard about that? Unless all the cutscenes were inner imagination or some sort of hallucination, which was not the case at the end, it seems. In the end, I had to face up to the fact that I was not going to figure out what the story was about, and I had to watch someone on YouTube explain it to me. Link in the description to a great video by Unranked Podcast, by the way. I don't want to be drip-fed a story, and I loathe hours of exposition. However, the way the story is told is so obtuse and tedious. Again, the story itself is not the issue. It's the way in which it was presented to me that I take issue with. I also need to address the collectibles in the game. It seems that every few minutes in the game, you get an in-game prompt alerting you to a location of a collectible. These were often very useful, and other times some parts were redacted for some reason. Apart from being a fed exposition, I really dislike games that have so much of the story behind collectibles and documents, and this should be used sparingly and cleverly, and unfortunately, in the case of Control, is neither. Moving on to presentation, and this is my absolute favorite. So you're probably thinking, I hated the game. Au contraire. The game is beautifully presented. Sometimes you get to experience a game that will forever stay with you. The game is set in a dull, grey government building, and the artists decided to use that to their advantage. The grey building becomes a canvas on which they drew saturated reds, orange and blues. There are a few images that will stay with me for a very long time, and I suspect that as they fade, I will find myself revisiting the game just to keep them alive. The voice acting is fairly good, and one particular performance of the lead scientist of the FBC, Dr. Darling, stood out to me.
Intrusions upon the perceived reality. Now, the service weapon is, of course, a prime example of an OOP, a very powerful one. Ingrained in the Bureau's DNA, a key component in our prime candidate program. Come out of that Russian roulette a winner, and you...
The attention to detail in the environment is excellent. Most of the offices felt lived in, and the props in the game lends to the authenticity that the building was indeed used by a government agency. The levels are well designed, as if they were designed to be used as a building by the FBC rather than a space for a character to fight monsters in a game. All of the textures, at least the more obvious ones, are really high res. The art team did a great job in creating some variation in what would otherwise be a drab government building. The areas look distinct without being obviously over-designed to deliberately be varied merely for the sake of being varied. Moving on to the gameplay. So the main gameplay loop is walking around, progressing the story and finding control points along the way. These act as fast travel points and save stations where you can recharge your health, upgrade your weapons, apply mods and spend ability points. Combat is fun and fast-paced. There is no ammo collection as your weapons reload automatically when not in use. That is when the game wants you to switch to using your supernatural abilities while your gun reloads. As you deplete the stamina bar by using your abilities, it's then time to switch to your weapon again. I really enjoyed the interplay between gun and using your abilities, and I thought they were well balanced. You'll get one weapon, however it can transform into 4 different variations: the handgun, shotgun, SMG and sniper. These can also be upgraded, and you can only equip 2 variations at any given time. I did not use the sniper apart from at the end of the game, as most of the encounters are at close range. Naturally, it follows then that the shotgun became very useful, also because it can break enemy shields. You can also use telekinesis to break shields, and then switch to your gun to unload a salvo of paranormal bullets into the enemy. You can unlock several abilities during your playthrough, and some of these are much better than others. Ability points are given when completing missions, and resources to upgrade are dropped by enemies. I don't want to spoil too many of the abilities, but there are some interesting ones that can synergize well with the gunplay. Enemies also drop sparky hologram thingies that you can pick up in combat to restore health, as there is no automatic health regeneration. Some bosses will drop these life-giving shiny bits mid-fight, and if you're low on health, it forces you to decide, either play it safe behind a pillar that can crumble at any time, or get closer to the boss to pick up these blooming, blinking blighters that restore your health. Speaking of, destruction is absolutely delectable. Some of your abilities will see all manner of officer supply hurtling through the air. Cover can be destroyed by enemies, and they will flank you in some cases. The enemies are fairly intelligent, however there were several occasions where I was able to cheese the game, as it seems the AI refused to simply move around corner I was using. There are several boss fights that I really enjoyed, as I found them challenging but fair, and your respawn points are usually not too far from where the boss is, so you can try a different strategy to overcome the challenge quite easily. I played this on normal difficulty, and I must say you need to keep your wits about you. That said, if you really like a challenge, play on one of the harder difficulties. I was never one-shot killed, and felt that if I died, I knew why and how to prevent it the next time. There are a good amount of enemy types, and many of them warrant a different approach. Some enemies have shields that can be broken by the shotgun, or hurtling objects at them. Some enemies can fly, while others act as tanks with rocket launchers. There are also a few puzzles to solve, which did not have me pulling out my hair. The clues were always not too far away, and were rather intuitive, so my dumb brain could deal with it. The game is mostly linear, however there are some side missions and also these timed events that would come up. One that has nothing to do with the main mission or these side missions, and is really just a bit of fun to kill enemies and a chance to drop a modification. They are by no means compulsory. So apart from the poor delivery of the story, and again I don't want to be spoon-fed the plot, but I did not enjoy the way its seemingly straightforward plot was intentionally obscured to seem clever or edgy. That said, every other part of this game meant that I loved the time with it, from the wonderful art style and the fluid combat. If you have not played it yet, do pick it up as soon as you get a chance.